You wake up, sit on the edge of the bed, and for a few seconds your body feels older than it did the night before. Your knees are stiff, your back takes a moment to straighten. The first few steps toward the kitchen are shorter than the steps you will take an hour later. Mat down again, and wait for your body to wake up properly. That routine feels harmless. After all, you have the rest of the day to move. But there is another way to begin the morning that asks something very different from the body. You put on comfortable shoes, step outside, and walk. Not a heroic walk, not a workout designed to leave you exhausted. Just enough movement to make your breathing slightly deeper, your legs work, your circulation increase, and the outside world reach your eyes. For someone over 65, that ordinary act can be surprisingly important. Not because morning possesses some special anti-aging property, and not because a walk can guarantee that anyone will live longer. Human longevity is influenced by genetics, disease, smoking, diet, medical care, socioeconomic conditions, accidents, and many other factors. The reason is more interesting. A regular walk gives several systems that determine how well you function with age. A reason to keep maintaining capacity. Your heart must deliver more blood. Your muscles must generate force. Your brain must coordinate balance and direction. Your blood vessels must adjust. Your cells must produce energy faster. And when that demand disappears from daily life, the body begins adapting to that absence too. That is the idea worth understanding. The body preserves capacity partly in response to the capacity you repeatedly ask it to use. This is why something as ordinary as a morning walk can become much more than a way of burning calories. Imagine the body as operating with a reserve. When you are sitting quietly, you need only a fraction of what your cardiovascular system, muscles, lungs, nervous system, and metabolism can theoretically provide. Standing asks for slightly more. Walking asks for more again. Walking uphill, carrying groceries, recovering from illness, or catching yourself when you stumble can demand considerably more. That difference between what ordinary life requires and what your body is capable of producing is functional reserve. You rarely notice reserve while you have plenty of it. A staircase is simply a staircase. Getting out of a low chair requires no planning. Crossing a street before the light changes does not feel like a physical test. A respiratory infection may make you tired, but you recover. Reserve becomes visible when it shrinks. Now the staircase feels steeper. The chair seems lower. You choose the elevator without consciously deciding why. You walk more carefully across an uneven parking lot. After several days in bed with an illness, normal activities feel disproportionately difficult. This is where aging matters, but not in the simplistic way it is often described. Age does not suddenly switch movement off. Instead, several parts of the system gradually become easier to lose and sometimes harder to rebuild. Muscle mass and especially rapid force production may decline. Motor units in the nervous system remodel. Aerobic capacity tends to fall. Blood vessels become less compliant. Sensory information from the feet, joints, eyes, and inner ear may become less precise. Recovery may take longer. The reserve can become smaller. And when the reserve becomes smaller, inactivity becomes more expensive. A younger person with a large reserve can lose some capacity and still remain far above the threshold required for daily independence. Someone older may have less distance between their current capacity and that threshold. That makes daily movement quietly important. A walk does not train every physical quality you need. It does not replace resistance training. It does not fully train balance. It does not solve every cardiovascular or metabolic problem, but walking has one extraordinary feature. It asks many systems to work together at the same time. The moment you begin moving, skeletal muscle requires more energy. To produce that energy, muscle cells increase their use of stored and circulating fuels. Blood flow is redirected toward active tissue. Heart rate usually rises. Breathing adjusts to support oxygen delivery and carbon dioxide removal. Meanwhile, every step creates a continuous negotiation with gravity. Your brain estimates where your body is in space. Sensory receptors provide information about the ground beneath you. The nervous system predicts where your center of mass will move next. Muscles around the ankle, knee, hip, and trunk make constant corrections that are so well practiced you rarely notice them. Walking feels simple because you have spent decades learning it. Simple does not mean biologically trivial, and this leads to the central answer behind the entire idea. A daily morning walk may support a longer, more independent life, not because walking contains a longevity switch, but because repeated movement helps preserve the physiological reserve that allows multiple body systems to continue functioning under demand. Population studies consistently find that people who take more daily steps tend to have lower mortality risk, although these studies cannot prove that the steps alone cause the difference. In a large meta-analysis combining data from 15 cohorts, the association between more daily steps and lower mortality eventually leveled off, and among adults, 60 and older, that plateau appeared at fewer steps than in younger adults. That last detail is useful because it challenges one of the most discouraging ideas surrounding exercise. You do not need to become an endurance athlete for movement to matter. In fact, some of the largest relative differences in health risk tend to appear when very inactive people become more active. That makes biological sense. Picture two people. One already walks several miles every day, gardens, climbs stairs, and exercises regularly. Adding another 10 minutes of walking still creates movement, but the additional challenge represents a relatively small change in the total signal their body receives. Now imagine someone who spends most of the day sitting and rarely walks farther than the car, kitchen, or mailbox. For that body, adding a consistent walk changes the daily environment much more dramatically. Muscles that were receiving very little repeated endurance demand now receive more. The cardiovascular system handles repeated increases in blood flow. The nervous system rehearses thousands of coordinated steps. Energy metabolism repeatedly shifts away from the resting state. The difference is not that one walk transforms the body. The difference is repetition. Bodies adapt to repeated signals. This principle is easy to see in muscle. If a muscle is repeatedly exposed to sufficient resistance, the tissue receives a reason to preserve or build the machinery needed to produce force. Remove most demand for long enough, and maintaining that expensive machinery becomes less necessary. Something similar happens with aerobic capacity. The cardiovascular system is not a static set of pipes. Blood vessels respond to changing flow. The heart responds to workload. Muscles adapt their energy-producing machinery according to demand. Regular activity repeatedly asks oxygen transport and energy production to operate above resting levels. No single walk is dramatic. That is precisely why walking can fit into ordinary life. And the morning can be useful here for a reason that has less to do with metabolism than with behavior. There is no strong evidence that a walk performed at 8 a.m. inherently extends life more than the same appropriate amount of walking performed later in the day. The body does not discard an afternoon walk because it missed breakfast. What morning offers is a dependable place in the day. Later hours accumulate, interruptions, appointments appear, weather changes, fatigue builds, someone calls, dinner needs preparing. The walk that was supposed to happen eventually becomes the walk that did not happen. Putting movement near the beginning of the day can turn it from an intention into a default. And if you walk outside, morning adds another biological signal: light. Light entering the eyes is one of the strongest environmental cues used by the brain's circadian timing system. Specialized cells in the retina send information about environmental brightness to brain regions involved in regulating the internal day-night rhythm. That timing system influences when alertness rises, when sleep pressure is expressed, and when many physiological processes are scheduled. Research suggests that the timing of light exposure matters for sleep and circadian regulation, and morning outdoor light can help reinforce daytime signaling, but this should not be exaggerated into a longevity claim. Morning light itself has not been shown to add a specific number of years to human life. Its value here is that an outdoor morning walk can combine two useful signals, movement and daytime light, inside one repeatable behavior. And this is where the story stops being only about your heart. Walking also changes what happens inside skeletal muscle. We often think of muscle as something that matters for lifting objects or changing appearance. But muscle is metabolically active tissue. Every contraction requires energy, and contracting muscle becomes a major destination for glucose and other fuels. When the muscles of your legs begin repeatedly contracting, they increase their demand for energy. That makes walking part of a larger metabolic conversation involving glucose handling, insulin sensitivity, blood flow, mitochondrial energy production, and the storage and use of fuel. Again, one walk does not erase metabolic disease, but repeated muscular activity changes the environment in which metabolism operates. Now picture what happens when movement disappears. The legs receive less repeated demand, energy expenditure falls. The cardiovascular system spends more time near resting output, balance and gait receive fewer challenging repetitions. The gap between sitting and the most demanding activity of the day grows. Eventually something subtle can happen. The body begins organizing life around the smaller capacity. A hill feels uncomfortable, so you avoid the hill. Because you avoid hills, your legs and cardiovascular system receive less challenge. That reduced challenge can allow capacity to decrease further. Now the hill feels even harder. Reduced capacity encourages avoidance. Avoidance reduces demand. reduced demand can contribute to further loss of capacity. The visible result may look like aging. Part of it is aging, but part of it can also be adaptation to a smaller physical world. This distinction matters because aging and inactivity interact. They are not identical. Researchers were able to test part of this idea directly in one of the most important trials involving older adults at risk of losing mobility. In the LIFE study, more than 1,600 sedentary adults between 70 and 89 years old were enrolled. These were not competitive athletes. They were people who already had physical limitations, but could still walk a short distance without assistance. Researchers randomly assigned them either to a structured physical activity program or to a health education program. The activity intervention centered largely on walking, supplemented with strength, flexibility, and balance work. The question was practical. Could regular physical activity actually delay the point at which vulnerable older adults lost the ability to walk 400 meters? Over an average follow-up of roughly 2.5 years, the structured activity program reduced the occurrence of major mobility disability compared with health education alone. That does not prove that a morning walk extends lifespan. It demonstrates something more directly established, even in older adults already at elevated risk. Physical capacity remains responsive to repeated activity, and maintaining movement can change an outcome closely connected to independence. The tissue has not forgotten how to respond. The starting point has changed. This may be one of the most important reversals in the entire discussion of aging. We tend to imagine physical decline as a one-way biological clock. Once walking becomes slower or getting up becomes harder, it is tempting to interpret the change as evidence that the body has simply reached a new permanent age. But many age-related changes involve thresholds. Older muscle, for example, can experience anabolic resistance. In simple terms, the muscle-building response to signals such as dietary protein or exercise may be less robust than it was earlier in life. That does not mean muscle can no longer adapt. It means the stimulus needed to produce a meaningful response may change. The same principle applies more broadly. If daily life becomes extremely easy physically, it may stop providing enough challenge to preserve the capacity you once maintained almost accidentally. When you were younger, you may have walked through large parking lots, climbed stairs at work, carried children, moved furniture, hurried through airports, stood for hours, and recovered without ever calling any of it exercise. Later life can quietly remove much of that background activity. The house may have fewer stairs. Work may no longer require commuting. Groceries arrive at the door. Heavy objects are avoided. Long distances are driven. Comfort increases while physical demand disappears. The body notices the second part. This is why the goal of a morning walk is not simply to accumulate steps on a screen. The deeper goal is to create a repeated demand that says, keep this system available. Your legs must still propel you. Your heart must still respond. Your balance system must still coordinate movement. Your energy-producing machinery must still increase output when asked. Your nervous system must still navigate a changing environment. And outside, the environment itself adds complexity that a chair never does. The pavement changes slightly. You turn your head, you step around something, you judge distance, you change speed. Your eyes scan ahead while your vestibular system tracks head movement and your feet report contact with the ground. This becomes particularly important with age because maintaining independence is not simply a question of how strong one muscle is, it is a coordination problem. You can have reasonable leg strength and still walk cautiously because balance feels uncertain. You can have good balance while walking slowly because cardiovascular reserve is limited. You can have adequate heart and lung capacity, but shorten your stride because arthritis makes each step uncomfortable. Medication, vision, neuropathy, fear of falling, previous injuries, neurological disease, and many other factors can change gait. So walking speed or distance is not a diagnosis, it is an output. The interesting part is how many systems contribute to that output. That is also why changes in walking ability can contain so much information about overall function. A person does not walk with their legs alone. They walk with a heart, lungs, blood vessels, sensory systems, joints, brain, muscles, attention, and confidence operating together. Walking makes reserve visible. Large observational studies, therefore, do not tell us that every additional step directly buys extra lifetime. People who walk more may differ from people who walk less. In many ways, researchers cannot completely measure, but the overall evidence is remarkably consistent. Higher physical activity and higher daily step counts are associated with lower mortality risk in older populations. A newer systematic review examining daily steps across adult populations likewise found substantial health associations well below the popular 10,000 step target. That means 10,000 should not become another number people use to decide whether they succeeded or failed. There is nothing biologically magical about crossing from 9,999 to 10,000. For someone currently taking very few steps, moving from almost none to somewhat more may be far more meaningful than chasing an arbitrary perfect total. Official recommendations reflect the same broader principle. For adults 65 and older, current U.S. guidance recommends at least 150 minutes of moderate-intensity aerobic activity each week, along with muscle strengthening work on at least 2 days and activities that challenge balance. Brisk walking is one example of moderate-intensity activity. Importantly, smaller amounts of movement can still count while someone gradually builds toward those targets. This also exposes the limitation of the morning walk. It is a foundation, not a complete aging program. Walking repeatedly moves your body through space, but it may not create enough resistance to preserve all the strength and power needed for demanding tasks. Getting out of a low chair, carrying a heavy bag, preventing a fall, or climbing steep stairs can require levels of force that ordinary flat walking does not train sufficiently. That is why strength work remains important. Balance deserves direct attention, too. But those facts do not weaken the case for walking. They put it in the correct place. Walking is an accessible way to make physical demand part of the architecture of the day. And there is another reason the morning habit can matter. It gives you information. Suppose you take roughly the same comfortable route regularly. Over time, you learn what normal feels like. You know the hill that slightly increases your breathing. You know how your knees normally feel during the first few minutes. You know whether you usually finish feeling energized or tired. You know approximately how steady you feel. That baseline can make changes easier to notice. Gradual variation is normal. One slow morning after poor sleep does not mean anything by itself. Hot weather, a stressful week, a minor infection, dehydration, soreness, and countless other factors affect performance. Patterns matter more than isolated moments, but a sudden, unexplained drop is different. New chest pressure, severe shortness of breath, fainting, new neurological symptoms, unexplained weakness, or a sudden major deterioration in walking ability should not be interpreted as something to push through in the name of fitness. Likewise, someone with recurrent falls, unstable cardiovascular disease, severe joint pain, substantial balance problems, or medical restrictions may need an individualized plan rather than simply walking farther because a video suggested it. The purpose is to create appropriate demand, not reckless demand. There is no prize for turning a sustainable habit into an injury. For many people, the useful intensity is surprisingly ordinary. During moderate activity, breathing becomes faster and the heart works harder, but the effort remains manageable. A person may still be able to speak, although singing would be more difficult. Someone who has been inactive may begin below that level and build gradually. The exact duration is less important at first than establishing a repeatable signal. 5 minutes can become 10, 10 can become 15. A short route can gradually become longer if the body tolerates it. The mistake is assuming that because the ideal weekly target sounds large, anything smaller is worthless. Biology does not work that way. The first increase from very low activity is still an increase in demand, and that brings us back to longevity. Living longer and remaining capable are related, but they are not the same outcome. Most people do not really want additional years merely as numbers on a calendar. They want years in which getting out of a chair remains ordinary, years in which walking through a store does not require planning, years in which they can carry something, visit someone, travel somewhere, recover from an interruption, and continue participating in their own life. No morning habit can guarantee that future. A walk cannot control every disease. It cannot control your genes. It cannot replace medical care, resistance training, adequate nutrition, sleep, social connection, or treatment of cardiovascular risk factors. But it can repeatedly ask the machinery of movement to remain machinery you still use. That is a profoundly different message from trying to defeat aging. You are not trying to trick the body into becoming younger. You are giving it a reason to maintain capacity. Tomorrow morning, the first few steps may still feel stiff. That stiffness may still take a few minutes to disappear. But now the decision to walk can mean something different. You are not merely trying to burn calories before breakfast. You are asking your muscles to produce force, your cardiovascular system to increase delivery, your nervous system to coordinate thousands of steps, your metabolism to meet a changing energy demand, and your balance system to keep solving the problem of moving through space. Morning is not the magic. The repeated signal is, a longer life can never be promised by a walk. But the capacity to keep moving through that life is something the body can continue practicing. And every morning you use that capacity, you give the body another reason to keep it.